What's it, guys? I'm back with the New Nation Part 4. So, when we left off, the first real battle has begun, and the American infantry are charging up the British line, who are advancing up the hill. So, leaving off from the charge, then Cox, still charging, saw a shell land in an infantry line. The infantry clashed, men stabbing and hitting one another. And about a minute later, Cox charged into Brits, drew his pistol, and shot one in the head. And Tom, who was behind the soldier, got brains on his foot. A Brit jumped on the back of Cox's horse and knocked him off. Cox saw he was an officer. Their swords crossed, and then a stray bullet skidded Cox in the shoulder and killed a man behind him. Then they started spearing Cox, held him long enough to draw his pistol and okay, I said that right, never mind. Pistol in right before he shot the officer. The officer looked at Cox and said, "Go to Hades." Hades is the Greek realm of heck, you know that area. The gun flashed, but Cox was knocked off balance by an artillery shell and shot the officer in the gut. The officer fell to his knees. Then Cox cut the officer's jugular. A shell went off about 10 feet away from Cox. He jumped through the ground. Then shrapnel cut his back. He turned on back to his feet and saw a bayonet and Tom's sword crossed above him. Cox rolled away from Tom's horse. Then he stood up, drew his pistol, and shot the soldier that was fighting Tom. He looked around the field, seeing death and destruction. He yelled, "Tom, sound our retreat!" And at that moment, Tom clamped the bugle to his lips and played the retreat. The cluster of troops retreated, and one by one was getting killed. Cox rode to meet Hanks and Drum, who happened to be riding to him. Hanks bursted out, "You darn coward! Reform!" "No, I'm saying what's left of this helpless army." And I don't know if you guys can see or not. Let's see if I can get in the camera. Basically, I'm censoring my own writing for YouTube, but let's see. Cox responded. Cox rode away with the rest of the army. Cox turned around and saw Hanks and Drum dead on the ground. He whispered under himself, "Darn fools." He rode off and escaped. Alright, guys, I'll go ahead and start the next chapter. I mean, we got plenty of time here. Cox, okay, here's the name of the chapter. New Army, New Leaders. Cox and the army fled south, so they pushed from Massachusetts. They fled into Texas, which, okay, there's an ideology here, steering off from the story. You have, if the American Rev never failed, Texans would probably never be inspired to rebel against Mexico. So the Alamo never happened, blah, 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 blah. That's why Texas is still Mexico. But it's referred to Texas. there's immigrants. So they fled to south to Texas, where Americans who were allowed by Mexico to be immigrants lived. They reached San Antonio. A man greeted them and let them in the city. The army settled in homes of the immigrants, which, let me add, there's not much of an army left. If you do the math, there'd only be like 2,000 soldiers. I'm saying about 600 remain. So there's not much to sell. The immigrants. Cox headed towards the meeting place for the Congress set for the fleeing army to meet with it. And meanwhile, Tom was eating dinner with the family that took him, and Tom looked across the table and said to the man of the house, "Will you join the English-Spanish army?" The man responded, "What's in it for me?" Tom said back, "Find for your true home." The man said, as if he knew what the Americans began fighting for, he said yes. Now, when I say the Spanish-American Army, I mean there's going to be a joint force of Mexicans and Americans. So, yep. In the meanwhile, in the Congress chamber, and I vote that's a great place to leave off.